All right. Good morning, good afternoon. It's 9 o'clock on the dot out here in sunny California, and either 10, 11, or 12, where you may be around the rest of the country. My name is Mark Sotkowski. I am the Chief Strategy Officer here at RapidScale. I'm also responsible for sales on the Western United States. Super excited today to have one of our key alliance partners, Veeam, here with us, and Mr. Dan Burke to talk about solving today's modern data protection needs. Dan, why don't you say good morning or good afternoon to the folks?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me on today. I'm super excited to share some great information with you here and work through the deck.
Fantastic, appreciate it, Dan. For those of you who are regulars to our monthly webinars, let's just give you a couple of quick housekeeping reminders here. Number one, this session is being recorded, so if you missed a part of it and you are on our subscription list, you'll be getting it emailed to you within 24 hours. We love to be interactive here at RapidScale, so if you have questions, feel free to send those to us through the chat, the Q&A panel, and we'll do our best to get them answered during the actual presentation, or we generally save a few minutes at the end and we can answer them there. I'd be remiss if I didn't welcome Miss Summer Fagoni, our marketing manager. She is here supporting us today. So Summer, thank you as always for being a key part of this presentation. And without further ado, let's talk about today's data backup challenges. Dan, you're in this world every day, probably a million times a day. Why don't you walk us through what our customers and prospects are seeing today?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Yeah, you know what I do? I have a lot of partners that I work with, and we're always taking a look at the different business challenges that are out there for end user customers. And what we hear out there is that, among many things, is that IT is spending too much time on backups. They're frustrated with recurring failures. A lot of them are probably using old technology. I like to think about tape in that scenario, right? That doesn't meet some of those more aggressive recovery time and recovery point objectives. And then legacy solutions. A lot of this stuff is old hardware. You know, a lot of folks think about backup as an insurance policy and not something that's becoming more and more important to the business generally. So having a plan and having an investment around it is definitely worth it. And then the other piece of this is not meeting compliance requirements. You know, more and more we live in a litigious and regulatory society, right? Different people have different financial, healthcare requirements for data retention, and meeting those compliance requirements is also critically important.
Yeah, Dan, I'll tell you what, you touched on two things right there that I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit on, because I find them really funny, right? The first one is, you know, traditionally, you have a time span on your hardware, right? And you say, I'm going to keep, it used to be 5 to 7 years. I think most IT professionals will tell you it's 3 to 5 years today. Yeah. But I always found it comical that they would take the production stuff and then move it over to a second colo and say, okay, this is now going to be our backup, right?
Right.
So your point on it's an insurance policy. We're really going to put our insurance policy with stuff that's end of life already.
Right. That may not have maintenance, that is far more likely to fail. And, you know, God forbid you need to actually fail over to that hardware. You're going to be running applications, modern applications you might have deployed in the last year on some equipment that's 5 years old. The moment it hits those processors and that kind of stuff, you're going to see significant performance degradation. So not always a great idea for sure.
Yeah, and then you also mentioned tape. I mean, be honest with the family of RapidScale folks, sellers on the phone here. How often do you really come across customers who are still relying on tape as their primary backup?
Yeah, you know, customers, I don't know what the customer slice would be. It depends on a variety of different things, to include the market that they're in, the size of the business. Sometimes you see enterprises with some legacy tape solutions, but I'll tell you, of the roughly 350 odd partners that we have in my territory, I can really only think of a handful, fewer than 5, that go to market with a tape solution, right? And it's meant to be that stick it to tape, stick it in a cave somewhere and never go get it again. And frankly, we've got more sophisticated solutions than tape for that kind of thing anymore. So less and less all the time.
Yeah, man, I can remember when we started RapidScale about 10 years ago, and I'd come across customers with tape and they were like, this is the best, most affordable way you can ever have your backup. And I'm like, guys, honest to goodness, true story, where do you take the tapes? And the guy looks at us and he points over to the safe, and the tapes from yesterday are sitting on top of the safe. I'm like, well, you got the fire challenge. You've got that covered right now. It's not even in the fireproof safe. It's on top of it, which is great. But yeah, so
we actually have what Veeam refers to as the 3-2-1 rule: 3 copies of your data, 2 types of media, and 1 off-site. So even having that tape and sticking it in a safe isn't an off-site solution, right? And that's one of the things we really focus on with those rapid scale solutions.
I love it, man. That's great. So we're going to talk now about a couple of real life opportunities that we've solved problems for customers here at Rapid Scale. So guys, we've got 3 of these to go through, and as you could imagine, we could probably spend 30 minutes on each. Yeah, so we're gonna keep it real high level, but this should give you all a good idea of where Rapid Scale is winning and what customers and prospects are looking for out there. So the first one's a public accounting company. And guys, this one is pretty much right in Rapid Scale sweet spot. Talking 300 employees, 13 locations. They have a small IT staff, which is always a great fit for Rapid Scale. We'll talk more about that later. But in this particular opportunity, what had happened was, to your point earlier, Dan, they talked about compliance. And they realized that they were not in compliance with their business continuity and disaster recovery plans. And they brought in an outside accounting firm, gotta love that, to do an audit on them. And the outside firm looked at them and said, hey, if you were to have some kind of a disaster and it was just non-peak season, you potentially could lose $16,000 an hour in lost revenue and production. And if it's peak season, you could be $31,000 an hour. And like most accounting firms, this particular firm does about 65 or 70% of their business over a 4-month period.
Right.
So it could really impact them heavily if it were to happen at the wrong time. But perfect example for a great fit for a Rapid Scale opportunity. Small IT staff, need compliance, outgrew what they had going on. I mean, how many of these do you run into on a daily, weekly basis, Dan? Is accounting and finance a good space for us to look?
I mean, every space is a good place to look. I'll tell you that professional services, accounting firms, I actually have a background in legal. These types of folks are billing their time for money. And, you know, we won't dig into it a whole lot today, but recovery time and recovery point objective, how long it's going to take you to get going again and how old is that data. All of this stuff is about time, right? And the value of the time to the business, right? So understanding how quickly you can get the data back is a critical component of this. So I would definitely say services firms are super important. Medical falls into that. Anybody who's servicing clients or customers on a regular basis.
Yeah, you make a great point, right? That charging back hourly for what they do. That wasn't on the top of my head, but yeah, if they can't work, they can't charge people, right? And that's going to be heavily impactful to them.
I've had my own issues as the IT director in law firms. We lost an Exchange server that was doing a lot of important roles on the network, and we were down for 3 days, and they told me it cost the firm $150,000, right? 100 employees, $500 an hour. I mean, the numbers add up quickly.
Yeah, and boy, we'll talk more. I mean, I hate to talk about the disaster side of the world, but this is the business we're in. And you know, you've got to prepare for it, especially once you get above that, what we like to term as micro SMB here at Rapid Scale. That's 10 users and under.
Yeah.
Once you get above that, your data is becoming more and more important on a daily basis. I've got a buddy who runs a construction company. When we started Rapid Scale, I was trying to talk him into letting me move his server up into the cloud, right? Yeah. He was looking at me, he goes, "You're crazy, Mark. I'd never spend that kind of money. I buy my server, it lasts for 5 years. I buy a new one. I got my guy who takes care of it. I'm good to go."
Right.
So I went in with the approach of, what happens if you crash? What happens if your server crashes? How are you going to go put the guys out to work? And I'm not lying to you, Dan. he pointed to a whiteboard on the wall and he goes like this, "That's the schedule for the next 2 months." I said, well,
you know what? And maybe that works for him.
yeah,
right?
and by the way, it was not a fit, right? Just
Yep.
certainly it was not.
Yep.
That was 10 years ago. Right. I can tell you this, he's a happy customer today because even the construction world has moved tremendously more as being reliant on technology.
Yeah.
So let's start. This is a nice one. It's a national car rental company. Everybody would know the name if I were allowed to disclose it. They're headquartered out of Nevada. They've got 10 locations, about 300 employees. Again, that's a great brick and mortar fit for RapidScale.
Yeah.
But this one was running. This was a different reason that we had an opportunity to talk to this customer. The partner who brought us into it uncovered and understood the compelling event that the customer had, and that's that their hardware was way outdated.
Yeah.
And we hear this all the time, right? And for this particular customer, they weren't under compliance strain to make a move or do anything like that. It was kind of like, we always say to our sales partners, why are they looking at this project why are they looking at this project? You know, what's the business impact of them doing it? What's the business impact of them not doing it? And then why are they looking at the cloud, right? And finally, what happens if they do nothing? Right. Well, this is one where we were up against what happens if they do nothing.
Right.
Because we couldn't get them to really think about, hey, what could this cost you? What could this hurt you? And then the sales manager who was involved in this one took a really interesting tack. And he said, hey, I think the rental car business is highly competitive. And he goes, yeah, of course it is. He goes, so what happens when your customers go to log on to the website and they can't get in to book a car? He goes, how many will pick up the phone and call you guys to book the car? And how many would just go to Hertz?
Right.
So obviously this isn't Hertz.
Right.
And it was that comment that had the general manager stop in his tracks and go like this, I didn't even think about it in that sense. Yeah. I could lose customers by the hundreds if I was down and they couldn't connect.
Right.
Right. So
and Frank, this is a great example of something that's not even necessarily a technology issue. This is a business issue, right? We're not talking about your hardware. We're talking about your ability to be able to service your customers, whether that's taking old hardware, out of the data center and moving into the cloud, or modernizing your backup and disaster recovery plans. This is about making money, generating revenue, retaining employees, all of that kind of stuff, right? So a lot of times you end up in a conversation with the IT guy, and the IT guy might say, yeah, everything's going great, but he's not thinking about the business as a whole, right? So depending on who you're engaged with, you want to be asking the right questions.
So classic, one of the things that we love to teach here at RapidScale and certainly bring it to our sales partner community is selling above and below the line. Right. And you just hit the nail on the head, right? If you're dealing with the IT director, he is below the line. He's there to do a job. He cares about the specifics of that job, and that's it, right? When we get above the line, you get into the visionaries of the business, the C-level suite, and they're thinking bigger picture, like you're saying. They're thinking about the business, right? And those are the ones we want to talk to about converting IT from a cost department into a profit department, right? Because we can help them do that. Right. So one more to talk about here, and this one is, to be fair, a little bit outside of RapidScale sweet spot. Headquartered in Oklahoma, it's a public school district. 1,500 employees and 12,000 students. So this one was a big one. Yeah. And they've got a couple of things on their mind. One is they're in Oklahoma, they're in the panhandle, right? And very susceptible to flooding. And of course, the school district has their own data center, and their own data center is not in a good place, and it has flooded in the past. So that was a big opportunity for us to move through there. But the thing that was driving this one, Dan, was ransomware. Yeah. And ransomware just had these guys freaked out. And I'll tell you what, I learned a little something about kids in the modern era when I was meeting with this customer about 2 years ago. And you might already know this. It shocked me, but then I laughed about it. Have you heard about students getting a server from Amazon and putting a DDoS attack against their own schools to get out of a test?
I have not, but I'll say that it doesn't surprise me. These kids' ability to do this stuff is next level anymore.
Yeah, when he told me that, I honestly freaked out. I was like, man, I remember it was a long time ago, but I remember taking tests, and I was never smart enough to think about grabbing a server and just hammering the school and knocking them out of business so I can't take my test. But let's talk about one of the biggest problems that we have today, and why backup, in my opinion, and I think this opinion is shared by a lot of people, why backup has really become an A1 priority in IT, and that's ransomware. So Dan, I mean, again, you live in this world 100 times a day. Talk to us about ransomware and how it's changing the backup and protection industry.
Yeah, so, and I won't go through and read all of these bullets here, but I would definitely make sure that you get a copy of this deck and you familiarize yourself with some of these statistics, right? Because when you're engaged with your customers out there, you want to be able to bring them some meaningful knowledge, even if they're not going to buy something, right? Some thought leadership here. But yeah, I mean, we talk about it obviously at Veeam constantly, both with our partners and with end user customers. And it is top of mind really more than anything else, especially with the distributed workforce over the course of the last year. We see more and more people working, in email and Teams, using SharePoint and OneDrive and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So super critical to everybody. But I think some of these numbers in here are scary. And the one I'll point out, the third bullet down here, only 37% of American businesses are confident that they could stop a ransomware attack. I mean, if you flip that number, I'm not great at math here, but I think that's 63% of businesses aren't confident. So call it half of US businesses aren't confident that they could stop a ransomware attack, and probably even fewer than that feel confident that they could recover. One of the great things, if we get nothing else out of this session today, one of the great things that rapid scale solutions can do is provide rapid recoverability of applications and data, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, in the event that they get stuck with hit with a ransomware attack. Instead of paying that big bill, which frankly the federal government doesn't want them doing anyway, because you're basically encouraging the terrorists to continue doing what they're doing, you want to have a really solid plan for getting back to business again. And Rapid Scale can definitely support that with Veeam powered solutions.
Yeah, appreciate that, Dan. And I will tell you this, Dan, I think you're aware that we're also really big in the security field and email, right? And that's where ransomwares come through. And we partner with a great ancillary partner, which is Mimecast. I don't know why I'm blanking on them. And Mimecast is kind of world renowned for getting the most 0-day stops, right? They catch everything because of how they're built. But guess what? People get by them too. I mean, it's going to happen at some point in time. It happens more often than people think, and people get caught with just big, massive phishing attacks, which are stupid. I mean, okay, we're in this industry, so I'm sure nobody on this phone call listening to us today would ever click on the link or the Word document from the prince of somewhere offering them $25 million. I pray to goodness that wouldn't happen. But if we look at how advanced the criminal element has gotten, right, and how they can spearfish and they can impersonate, it can happen. And I think the big piece of it, of having that strong backup solution in place with a good process behind it, it gives that customer the ability to make an informed decision of, am I going to roll back or am I going to pay these guys, right? Yep. And if I roll it back and I lose the day, I'm going to lose a lot of work and a lot of money depending on how big I am. But these ransomware attacks can get ridiculously expensive.
Right.
And today they're really going after some target businesses. But I don't want to make this a ransomware attack. So let's talk a little bit more about Veeam as a whole. This is I call this your brag slide, Dan, because we certainly feel as though we are partnered with absolutely the best recovery and support backup company we can find. And we went through a few, to be fair. We started this relationship with Veeam, I think about 5 years ago, when we grew into the size of an organization that needed Veeam. So talk to us a little bit about what maybe our sales partners don't know about Veeam, or whatever you'd like to cover here.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just start out, and again, your brag slide here. I've actually got a separate one which we didn't include for this presentation, but a couple of key numbers that we often talk about. We have a fantastic NPS score, which is a customer happiness and retention type number out there in the marketplace of 75. But the real numbers that I like to talk about are that today, Veeam was born kind of in that small commercial business, but today we're doing business with 85% of the Fortune 500, and we're doing business with 66% of the Global 2000. So if I'm spitballing again, which I like to do, we're all in sales. What's the round number? Half of businesses are working with Veeam, or are familiar with Veeam, or maybe even looking at using Veeam, right? So one of the things, again, if you come out of this training, is don't be afraid to drop the Veeam brand name, right? It's well known, it's well respected. I mean, heck, our tagline is "It just works," right? So there's a ton of leverage you can get out of dropping the name brand. And then the other thing here is 400,000 customers, business customers worldwide are using the product. So in terms of reach, right, there's a reason why we're up in the top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant there. And then in terms of service offering here, the cool thing is that RapidScale has done an amazing job of building this solution out, to include things like hosted repositories, right? So they can be the cloud repository for the customers. Veeam has a piece of a feature built into it called Cloud Connect, and it seamlessly pushes copies of backup over to the RapidScale data centers, right? It's a secured cloud infrastructure, right? So you don't have bad guys. You're not just using OneDrive, for example. There's an air gapping that happens to keep the data safe. Everything is encrypted in flight, over an SSL connection. And then we've got tremendous recoverability options. We talked a little bit about recovery time and recovery point objective. You can get that data back in those applications, including granular stuff, right? If you need just a table or an entry out of a database, you can get into the Veeam software and get that data back. And then, of course, it integrates with a lot of great management tools, and RapidScale is constantly innovating with Veeam around the different functionalities in terms of management and remote monitoring and that kind of stuff. So super excited about the stuff we've been doing together.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you touched on something there that I'm gonna highlight for one quick second for the team listening today. The ability for Veeam to get very granular and go and actually grab like an Excel file for somebody who lost it or corrupted one, and that's all you want to get, right? That, by the way, is hugely efficient versus having to go and pull back a whole server or a whole day and then go look for it, right? So yep. The software is phenomenal. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of how RapidScale and Veeam work together, right? And this is really more for our sales partners who should, if you know RapidScale, we've got a 3 tiers of management plan of how we go out to market to our customers. And, backup comes into this perfectly because it happens all of the time. I'm not being mean to Dan or to Veeam or to all of our IT professionals out there, but managing backups is a very redundant job, right? And it's not something that a highly paid IT professional is going to want to do on a daily basis, right? They don't like doing that. Mm-hmm. And it goes perfectly into RapidScale's 3 tiers of management. So on the far left, this is a do it yourself. This is like an Amazon, like an Azure. You've got an IT team, you pay a bunch of people a lot of money, and you're just looking for a good platform because you don't want to purchase hardware anymore, right? You want to consume IT based on what your needs are today, not needs of the future. And we've got plenty of customers who use us for that, and they do everything. They're generally large, and I happen to like them a lot because they pay their bills on time. You never have to chase those people down. Then you go all the way to the other side.
I think we might have lost Mark.
We're a restaurateur, right? We don't want to hire a bunch of people in IT. We want you to do everything for us. Again, these are fairly large, typically 300-400 employees plus. And the opposite of the other guys, these guys typically won't. Uh-oh.
I think
you're back. You're back now, Mark. It was just a second.
Okay. But right in the middle is the co-managed on-premise backup, right? And this is where our customers love working with us. I lovingly say that we can be the plumbing for your building, right? Just we'll take out all the stuff you don't want to deal with, and you can hand it to RapidScale, and we'll be responsible for it. And we do this on a daily basis, and we have a lot of customers using us to handle their backups. Dan, how does that match up to other suppliers that you work with out there in the industry?
Yeah, we see a lot, from a kind of a very vanilla service offering, we see a lot of that kind of unmanaged backup repository out there. There are commercial names that folks are aware of that, you can go to the website, swipe your credit card, and then have a repository to put your backups into. There's not a whole lot of value in that, right? Those customers who are buying that kind of thing, they don't care about the relationship. They're just going to look for the cheapest thing out there. And there are certainly people in the market that are doing that. The flip side of that, as you pointed out, was that fully managed solution, right? Maybe a decent sized company that doesn't have an IT person and they outsource a lot of this stuff. That's a great fit. The co-managed, I think, is really cool because what we tend to find, and we talked about it at the beginning, IT staff at most of these companies don't have a lot of time. Most folks don't hire a bunch of IT folks to be sitting around and doing nothing. They might have one or two people, right? So in the co-managed side of things, they can really work with that one, maybe two on-prem or company employed IT folks, and they're going to be making some changes here, maybe standing up an application, and they want to add a new virtual machine to the backup job. They can do that, but they can also coordinate with RapidScale to ensure that maybe they're doing everything right, that the backups are working. If they run into an issue, they have somebody to call that can help kind of support getting things going again. So I think this co-managed piece is really powerful for a lot of that kind of mid-commercial, small enterprise type companies.
Yeah, no, can't agree with you more, man. And again, I say it with love and passion. We don't mind doing this. We have entire teams of technicians who are here to do backups, and they enjoy it, right? They actually like doing it. Don't like doing it, but you know what I mean. So I know that we've got a whole bunch of sales partners on the call today, and they really want to know about. We're hearing you guys. We get it. This is important to businesses today. So how do we uncover those opportunities, right? So Dan, walk us through what you're seeing out there in the field.
Yeah. So I always tell folks, the first thing you need to do is kind of qualify them, right? Nobody wants to be chasing down an opportunity that's never going to actually materialize. So make sure you understand what they've got going on-prem. Do you have servers on-premise or in the data center today? Maybe some custom applications that are super critical to the business, because it's not always just about data. It's about the application. Go back to the law firm, right? We're doing document management. We're keeping our time. We're going, working on litigation. There's a lot of custom stuff happening there. And then I would say always ask them what they're doing to get things off site, right? We talked about the 3-2-1 rule, one off site. Are you rotating tapes? Are you really rotating tapes, or do you just wish you did? So I think those are obviously critical questions to get into. If they start answering yes to these things, ask them how confident they feel that they could recover in the event of a disaster, and maybe even ask them if they've tested it, right? Because it's one thing to have a backup. It's one thing to have a backup that succeeds. I've been trapped with this myself. I'll admit it. I thought everything was great, and then I had a problem and I had to restore. And guess what? My restores weren't what they needed to be, and I had a major problem on my hands. It took a week to get things running again. And then the other question, and there are a bunch in here. The other one I would say is, to Mark's point, how much time is your IT staff spending on this, right? Is their time not better spent focused on making the employees more productive, or implementing new applications or solutions that are going to help generate revenue and create efficiencies? Or do you want them focused on backup, right? It's not sexy. It needs to happen. That's the kind of thing you can outsource to a provider like RapidScale. Get it off your plate. Don't waste time with it, and focus on what really matters.
Yeah, and Dan, to your point, if it goes wrong, have somebody to blame.
Right. Or I'll even say someone to collaborate with.
Right. We've had customers look at us and point blank tell us, "Hey, man, I'm moving this to you because if it goes bad, I'm firing you and I'm going to keep my job." And I'm like, well, the good news is I have a high level of confidence that we're going to be able to work well together, and it'll be mutually beneficial.
Right. Exactly.
So, guys, we're coming into Homeplate here. as always, we've got a ton of resources for you to go out there and market and build and put cloud first and sell backup solutions. By the way, backup is a perfect Trojan horse. You can enter any size company from several different opportunity levels and start talking about backup. So it's something that you should learn about because it's critical to almost all businesses that are running out there today that do business with RapidScale for sure. Remember, we've got the Technology Leadership Academy that's open to everybody. If you haven't been in there in a while, go check it out. Putting up new stuff all the time. All of your slicks are available through the RapidScale document repository. If you don't know how to get there or what that is, here's our channel manager map. These are our cloud solution consultants supporting you guys across the country. We will be sending this map out at the end of the session today with everybody's updated contact information. So if you don't know who your CSC is, your cloud solutions consultant, AKA channel manager, feel free to reach out to Summer or myself, and we'll get you aligned based on your geography and where you're at. With that, I'm going to see if there's any questions in the last minute. Summer, did anything come in?
I will just ask one. Many folks in our region actually still do use tape backups. How do you recommend me starting that conversation specifically?
Yeah, good question. I would always go back to recovery time and recovery point, right? You may find somebody who says, listen, my tapes work great. I have a process down. I know what it's going to take to get my data back. I know how long it's going to take. My business is tolerant or whatever it is. But I would always say, tapes are great. Tapes are reliable. If you had a disaster and you had to go to the tape, what does that process look like? You got to order hardware, you got to call Iron Mountain, you got to get the tape back, you got to build the infrastructure, you got to restore the applications and the data. How long is that going to take? What if I could provide you with a solution that would significantly reduce that recovery time and recovery point objective and make the business happier in the event of a disaster? Would that be of value to you? And almost all of them will say yes.
Great answer, Dan. And I'll just chime in on top of that, hey, everybody thinks because they bought a tape solution, it doesn't have a cost associated to it. That's the farthest thing from the truth out there, guys. If you can get that customer to explain to you how much they pay to store the tape, what's it cost to take the tape back and forth, who's running it on their side. I mean, it is certainly at 50,000 feet, it looks like it has no cost. When you dig into it with our solution engineers, they'll show you that there's a lot of costs there. With that, Summer, we will close it out. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Really a pleasure to have you on the call. Always like the expertise from our partners to support our sales efforts. Everybody keep an eye out for the March registration. It should be in your inbox in the next in the next week or so. You won't want to miss this one. The next one that we're going to cover, guys, is how is RapidScale putting the world of SD-WAN on its ear, and why are we being so successful at it in the last 2 years? You won't want to miss this one. So please join us next month. Thanks all. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Summer.
Thanks.
Everybody have a great day.